Darby's translation 1890. Luke 6. And it came to pass on the first Sabbath, that he went through cornfields, and his disciples were plucking the ears and eating them, rubbing them in their hands. But some of the Pharisees said to them, Why do ye what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath? And Jesus answering said to them, Have ye not read so much as this, what David did when he hungered, he and those who were with him, how he entered into the house of God and took the showbread and ate, and gave to those also who were with him, which it is not lawful that any eat, unless the priests alone? And he said to them, The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath also. And it came to pass on another Sabbath also that he entered into the synagogue and taught, and there was a man there, and his right hand was withered. And the scribes and the Pharisees were watching if he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find something of which to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts, and said to the man who had the withered hand, Get up, and stand in the midst. And having risen up he stood there. Jesus therefore said to them, I will ask you if it is lawful on the Sabbath to do good, or to do evil? To save life, or to destroy it? And having looked around on them all, he said to him, Stretch out thy hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored as the other. But they were filled with madness, and they spoke together among themselves what they should do to Jesus. And it came to pass in those days that he went out into the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. And when it was day he called his disciples, and having chosen out 12 from them, whom also he named apostles, Simon, to whom also he gave the name of Peter, and Andrew his brother, and James, and John, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon who was called Zealot, and Judas brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, who was also his betrayer. And having descended with them, he stood on a level place, and a crowd of his disciples, and a great multitude of the people from all Judea and Jerusalem, and the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him, and to be healed of their diseases, and those that were beset by unclean spirits were healed. And all the crowd sought to touch him, for power went out from him and healed all. And he, lifting up his eyes upon his disciples, said, Blessed are ye poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. Blessed are ye when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from them, and shall reproach you, and cast out your name as wicked, for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in the heaven, for after this manner did their fathers act toward the prophets. But woe to you rich, for ye have received your consolation. Woe to you that are filled, for ye shall hunger. Woe to you who laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep. Woe, when all men speak well of you, for after this manner did their fathers to the false prophets. But to you that hear I say, Love your enemies, do good to those that hate you, bless those that curse you, pray for those who use you despitefully. To him that smites thee on the cheek, offer also the other, and from him that would take away thy garment, forbid not thy bodycoat also. To every one that asks of thee, give, and from him that takes away what is thine, ask it not back. And as ye wish that men should do to you, do ye also to them in like manner. And if ye love those that love you, what thank is it to you? For even sinners love those that love them. And if ye do good to those that do good to you, what thank is it to you? For even sinners do the same. And if ye lend to those from whom ye hope to receive, what thank is it to you? For even sinners lend to sinners that they may receive the like. But love your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be sons of the highest, for he is good to the unthankful and wicked. Be ye therefore merciful, even as your Father also is merciful. And judge not, and ye shall not be judged, condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned. Remit, and it shall be remitted to you. Give, and it shall be given to you, good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over, shall be given into your bosom, for with the same measure with which ye mete it shall be measured to you again. And he spoke also a parable to them, Can a blind man lead a blind man? Shall not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his teacher, but every one that is perfected shall be as his teacher. But why lookest thou on the mote which is in the eye of thy brother, but perceivest not the beam which is in thine own eye? Or how canst thou say to thy brother, Brother, allow me, I will cast out the mote that is in thine eye, thyself not seeing the beam that is in thine eye? Hypocrite, cast out first the beam out of thine eye, and then thou shalt see clear to cast out the mote which is in the eye of thy brother. For there is no good tree which produces corrupt fruit, nor a corrupt tree which produces good fruit. For every tree is known by its own fruit, for figs are not gathered from thorns, nor grapes vintaged from a bramble. The good man, out of the good treasure of his heart, brings forth good, and the wicked man out of the wicked, brings forth what is wicked, for out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. And why call ye me, Lord, Lord, and do not the things that I say? Every one that comes to me, and hears my words and does them, I will shew you to whom he is like. He is like a man building a house, who dug and went deep, and laid a foundation on the rock. But a great rain coming, the stream broke upon that house, and could not shake it, for it had been founded on the rock. And he that has heard and not done, is like a man who has built a house on the ground without a foundation, on which the stream broke, and immediately it fell, and the breach of that house was great. By F. B. Hole. Luke 6. As we open this chapter, we see the Pharisees and scribes attempting to confine the actions of the disciples, and then also the gracious power of the Lord, within the limits of the Jewish Sabbath, as they were accustomed to enforce it. This illustrates his teaching at the close of chapter 5, and in result the bottle of the Jewish Sabbath burst, and grace flows forth in spite of them. The words, the second Sabbath after the first, refer we believe to Leviticus 23 verses 9 to 14, and are intended to show us that the wave sheaf had already been offered, and hence there was no objection to the action of the disciples except the Pharisees' own strict enforcement of the Sabbath. The Lord's answer to their objection was twofold: first, his position; second, his person. His position was analogous to that of David when he went into the house of God and took the showbread. David was God's anointed king and yet rejected, and it was not the mind of God that his anointed with his followers should starve in order to uphold small technicalities of the law. The whole system of Israel was out of course by the refusal of the king, and it was no time for concentrating upon the smaller details of the law. So here, the Pharisees were concerned about trivialities whilst rejecting the Christ. Verse 5 emphasizes his person. Man, as originally created, was made Lord over the earthly creation. The Son of Man is Lord over a far wider sphere. He was not bound by the Sabbath was at his disposal. Who then is this Son of Man? That was what the Pharisees did not know, but the Lord indicated his greatness by this claim which he made. The incident concerning the man with the withered hand follows in verses 6 to 11. Here again the Sabbath question came up, and the Pharisees would have pushed their technical objections to the length of forbidding the exercise of mercy on that day. Here we see, not the assertion of the Lord's position, nor of his person, but of his power. He had power to heal in grace, and that power he exercised whether they liked it or not. He accepted their challenge, and making the man stand forth in the midst, he healed him in the most public way possible. The lords of the Philistines attempted to tie the hands of Samson with 7 green withs, but they tried in vain. The lords of Israel were trying to make cords from the law of the Sabbath, wherewith to tie the gracious hands of Jesus, and they also tried in vain. Failing to do it, they were filled with madness, and they began to plot his death. In the face of their rising hatred, Jesus retired into the solitude of communion with God. In the last chapter we saw him retiring for prayer when multitudes thronged him and success seemed to be his. He does just the same when dark clouds of opposition seem to surround him. In all circumstances prayer was the resource of the perfect man. It is significant further that what followed this night of prayer was the selection of the 12 men who were to be sent forth as apostles. Amongst the 12 was Judas Iscariot, and why he should have been included appears to us mysterious. The Lord chose him, however, and thus his selection was right. No mistake was made after that night of prayer. From verse 17 to the end of the chapter we get a record of the instruction which he gave to his disciples, and especially to these 12 men. We may give a general summary of his utterances by saying that he instructed them as to the character that would be produced in them by the grace of God that he was making known. The discourse much resembles the Sermon on the Mount of Matthew 5-7, but the occasion appears to have been different. No doubt the Lord again and again said very similar things to varying crowds of people. On this occasion, the Lord addressed his disciples personally. In Matthew he described a certain class, and says that theirs is the kingdom. Here he says, yours is the kingdom, identifying that class with the disciples. His disciples were the poor, the hungry, the weepers, those hated and reproached. A description such as this shows that already he was treating his own rejection as a certainty, and the succeeding verses, 24 to 26, show that he was dividing the people into two classes. There were those identified with himself, sharing his sorrows, and those who were of the world and sharing its transient joys. Upon the head of the one class he called down a blessing, upon the head of the other a woe. This of course involved a tremendous paradox. The sad and rejected are the blessed, the glad and the popular are under judgment. But the one follow in the footsteps of the Son of Man and suffer for his sake, the other follow in the way of the false prophets. Having thus pronounced a blessing upon his disciples, he gives them instructions which, if carried out, would mean that they reflected his own spirit of grace. He does not actually send them for the moment, but he instructs them in view of their going out to represent him and to serve his interests. The spirit of grace is specially marked in verses 27 to 38. The love that can go forth and even embrace an enemy is not human but divine, whereas any sinner can love the one who loves him. The disciple of Jesus is to be a lover, a blesser, a giver, and on the other hand he is not to be one who judges and condemns. This does not mean that a disciple is to have no powers of sound judgment and discrimination, but it does mean that he is not to be characterized by the censorious spirit that is quick to impute wrong motives and thus judge other people. These instructions were exactly fitted to those who were called to follow Christ during his sojourn upon earth. The spirit of them equally applies to those called to follow him during his absence in heaven. This is the day of grace, in which the gospel of grace is being preached, and it is therefore of the utmost importance that we should be marked by the spirit of grace. How often, alas, has our conduct belied the cause with which we are identified? A great deal of gracious preaching can be totally nullified by a little ungracious practicing on the part of the preacher or his friends. By the manifestation of love we prove ourselves to be the true children of God, the God who is kind to the unthankful and to the evil. It is not so easy to discern the sequence of the teaching contained in verses 39 to 49, but a sequence there undoubtedly is. These disciples were to be sent forth as apostles before long, so they must be seeing persons themselves. If they were to be seeing, they must be taught, and for that they must take the humble place at the feet of their master. They were not above him, he was above them, and the goal set before them was to be like him. He was perfection, and when their college course was completed they would be as he is. That this might be so, a spirit of self-judgment is to be cultivated. Our natural tendency is to judge others and perceive their smallest faults. If we judge ourselves we may discover some very substantial faults. And faithfully judging ourselves we may be able eventually to help others. From verse 43 the outward profession of discipleship is contemplated. The Lord may have had such an one as Judas specially in view, in speaking thus. Amongst those who took the place of being his disciples there might be found an evil man, as well as a good man. They are to be discerned by their fruits, seen in both speech and action. Nature is revealed in fruit. We cannot penetrate the secrets of nature either in a tree or in a man, but we can easily and correctly deduce the nature from the fruit. This leads to the consideration that mere profession counts for nothing. Men may repeatedly call Jesus their Lord, but if there is no obedience to his word, there is no discipleship that he acknowledges. The kind of foundation that cannot be shaken under the testings is only laid by obedience. The mere hearing of his word apart from obedience may erect an edifice which looks like the real thing, but it means disaster in the day of testing. Let us all bring ourselves under the searching power of this word. The truest believer needs to face it, and not one of us can escape it. It applies to the whole circle of truth. Nothing is really and solidly ours until we yield to it the obedience of faith, not only the assent of faith, but the obedience of faith. Then, and only then, we become established in it, in such a way that we are founded upon a rock. These words of our Lord uncover for us, without a doubt, the secret of many a tragic collapse as regards their testimony, on the part of true believers, as also collapse and abandonment of the profession of discipleship on the part of those who have taken it up without any reality. Reality is that, which above all things, the Lord must have.